Hi guys, Owen from Owen Thomas Woodcraft here. Welcome back to my spare room. Since I'm working from home at the moment, this is where I have a nice bit of space to do my videos. So last time I did a little video on essential spoon carving kit, and I had a lot of people ask after that, how do you keep your tools sharp? So sharpening video time. This first one, I'm going to look at sharpening a spoon knife because that's probably the one I think that most people have difficulty with. Right, so the knife that I'm going to sharpen today is one of these, which is a Wood Tools compound curve spoon knife. These are pretty similar to ones most of you guys are going to have. So what I'm going to show you is the best way that I think you should be sharpening a spoon knife that doesn't have a hollowed out inside. So there are different ways of sharpening a spoon knife, and it depends what sort of knife you have as to what method you use. So what I'm going to do to begin with is look at working the outside of the knife and trying to maintain the proper angle on the bevel. So one thing you can do to start with, which is really helpful, is to get something like a Sharpie or some sort of permanent pen and colour in this bevel, because it's important that you get all the way to the edge and that you try and keep the bevel as close to the manufacturer as you can. Obviously, if you are fully reshaping a spoon knife, this isn't particularly relevant. But if your spoon knife is working really nicely, that's because the angles of the bevel are correct. If you start changing those, it will start working differently, potentially to the point that it stops working. So you can see I've got that bevel all nicely coloured in now, all the way to the edge. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and then we will start with it. Right, so you can see I am sharpening with water stones. You don't have to use water stones. You don't need to go out and spend a load of money on them. What you can use is wet and dry paper on a nice flat block. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be a glass sheet. One thing that I've found useful in the past is using little blocks of thick MDF, because MDF is manufactured to be flat. So you can cut up some sheets of MDF into little blocks like this kind of size. Get some wet and dry paper. You can get self-adhesive wet and dry paper. You don't necessarily need it to be self-adhesive. You can just wrap it round, get it on the block, and you can use this exact same technique on any type of sharpening system that you have. Sharpening systems, that sounds quite fancy for bits of sandpaper glued to blocks, but it is what it is. Yeah, I prefer water stones. These aren't expensive water stones. These are made by King. They are, for what they are, they're relatively cheap. I don't remember how. Well, I've had these for years. I can't actually remember how much I paid for them, but they are not expensive. But they are very effective. They work very well. But as I said, any of these techniques that I'm going to show you, you can use them on any kind of stone, any kind of wet and dry paper, sandpaper based setup you have. It's all the same. Right, so I'm just making sure my block's nice and wet. So I like to start with the outside of the knife. I find it really helpful to use an underhand grip. So there's the bevel that side, like that. You don't want to be white knuckle holding it. You need to be able to feel what the blade's doing. So if you're holding it too tight, you're going to start losing the feel of where the knife is. So underhand, just place it on top of the stone. Then you need to twist it down to find the edge of the bevel. You can rock it backwards and forwards. You should be able to feel where the edge is. Let's get that out of the way. So I use a finger to support here, and I'm working away from the edge. This side's the edge, so I'm pushing away from myself, and as I'm moving, twist it like that. Can you see already on the edge? Started taking some of that marking off. So before you start each stroke, you make sure it's nice and stable. I'm not pushing down super hard. I'm letting the blade do the work. Sorry, letting the stone do the work. Blade do the work. What am I talking about? So this water stone's about 1,000 grit. I wouldn't go much lower than that to start off with, unless you were completely reshaping, trying to reshape the blade. So every so often, I'm going to just check, run my finger flat across the edge, just to see if I'm raising a burr, and I am, which is awesome news. If you're not raising a burr, it means you're not going right to the edge, and you don't have a fine edge. So that's going pretty good at the moment. I obviously need to do a little bit more down the bottom here, but it's all around the top there. I can feel a little burr on the edge, so I'm going to keep working at this. Okay, so I can feel, if I run my finger carefully there, that I've raised a burr all the way along, and I've got rid of all of my all of the marking that I put in there. So I'm pretty confident that that's down to a thin edge now. What I'm going to do now is just work my way up through the grits of stone that I have. So this is a 1,000. I have a 4,000 and a 6,000, and then I'm going to go on to honing. If you have more grits than that, go through all of them. This is just what I have. Yeah, so exact same process with the other stones as with this one. Yeah, let's do it. So getting to the end of this now, I can feel a burr all the way along the edge there. Sometimes you can also see it if you tilt it. If you tilt the knife in the light right, you can see the little twinkles from the edge. There, that's pretty good. So for the inside, again, like with the stones, there's a few different options of what you can use. I am going to be using this, which is a ceramic knife sharpener that costs about £10 from IKEA, but it's very hard, so it's a very, very fine grit. Actually probably higher than what I was using for the outside. I'm not trying to take lots of material off of the inside at the moment. All I'm wanting to do is to remove that burr from the edge, so that we get a real fine razor edge. Working too much on the inside can lead to mucking up the angle. Okay, so you want to be making sure that your knife is nice and supported. If you're just holding it in the air like that, you're more likely to wobble around as you're doing it. So try and keep it supported. And as with the working on the outside bevel, you want to work away from the edge. I'm just going to try and get nice long strokes. Trying to do all the way along in one stroke. If you just stick in one place and do it like that, you run the risk of putting flat spots into the blade. So the further you can travel with each stroke, the better. Right, next stage is to do some honing. So I'm going to get the paste out and make it shiny. So at the start of the video I said that there were different ways of sharpening different knives. So just so you are clear as to what I mean about that, the majority of spoon knives will be like the one I've just sharpened. Okay. The different sort of spoon knife, not the size, would be if your inside of the blade looks like this. So it's been hollowed so that you have two flats on the edges. Now the reason this is done is to make it easier to sharpen. But what you should do if you have a knife like this would be to do the majority of your sharpening from the inside, and then take the burr off on the outside, rather than the way I'm showing you, which is to sharpen from the bevel. These knives are made to be sharpened in that way. These knives are made to be sharpened the other way. Certainly with knives like this, it's better to do it how it was intended. With this kind of knife, odds are that the inside isn't dead flat. So unless you completely flatten the inside, sharpening from the inside won't be as effective as sharpening from the outside. So just bear that in mind when you're sharpening your knives. Right, onto the honing. So I use just a little bit of flat plywood as a board to put some honing paste or honing wax on. So I'm just going to make sure I've got a good amount on there. And I'm going to try and do the same kind of motion on this as I did on the stones. It's a bit of a weird feeling when you do it for the first few times, but once you get the balance, it will be like second nature. Same with finding that edge initially. When you start, it will take a little bit of time, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be alright. Oh yeah. Oh, look at that. Shiny, shiny. So I'm just going to hold this up a little bit because this is really thin and the blade's quite angled here. I need to hold it up. But honestly, when you're polishing, as long as you're keeping, because you're not trying to push down really hard, just try and keep it on the bevel. You shouldn't go too wrong because it's not taking off loads of steel in one stroke. You'd be surprised how much it does take off, which is why I prefer to use a hard board rather than leather, because if you use leather you can create a sort of micro bevel right on the end, which will, if you hone too much, that micro bevel will turn into a larger bevel, and it can make it difficult to for the edge to cut properly, for the knife to work properly. So I am a big fan of using a hard surface for honing rather than a leather. It doesn't matter how hard or tough the leather is or what sort of leather it is. It will all create a tiny little bevel on the edge, but flat surfaces don't do that so much. Right, so I am pretty chuffed with that. If you want to, you can hone on the inside as well. I just use this really because it's so hard, such a fine grit. I've tried honing the inside, but because this is such a fine grit, I don't find it makes a massive amount of difference if I do or don't hone, or any difference, or not. It's not noticeable. But if you want to hone the inside, I would suggest that you get yourself a bit of dowel, just any old bit of wooden dowel, and cover your dowel in your honing compound, whether it's something like this, or you can get auto sol. Really easy, probably from any sort of garage or hardware shop. It's like a chrome polish. That's really easy to get hold of. Tormek make a really good paste. They sell tubes of it, or these sort of wax block compounds you can get from loads of different places. Loads of woodwork places do it. This came from Hewn and Hone. I suggest you check them out. They've got so much good sharpening stuff. Yeah, so that is pretty much it. I will go and find a bit of wood to prove how sharp it is. Here we go, nice bit of birch, and hey, it's really sharp. So, easy as that really. As I said, it takes a little bit of time to get used to finding the angles and maintaining them as you push. That's the real challenge. But just take your time. The pen on the bevel really helps. Yeah, patience. Anything worth learning is going to take you a little bit of time. And you can get, as long as you follow the steps, you're going to get good at it. You don't need to buy loads of fancy kit. You can if you want to, but you don't need to. Right guys, there you have it. A scary sharp spoon knife. I hope that was helpful to you. I've tried to keep it as simple as I can. I know I can go on a little bit sometimes and make it potentially sound a bit more complicated than it actually is, but I am trying to keep things simple. If you've got any questions, pop them down in the comments and I'll try and answer them, either in the comments or in another video. Like I said, there's loads of different people have different ways of sharpening. This is how I do it. Other people will tell you different, and that's fine. And yeah, you don't need to spend loads and loads of money on a sharpening kit. You can do a lot of it with real cheap stuff like wet and dry paper, bits of MDF, bits of broomstick. But yeah, I hope that I've helped some of you understand sharpening a little bit better. I will be back soon with another video because I still don't really have very much to do with my time. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. So until next time, stay sharp and stay positive.